Josh Sim, reporter at Sports Pro. On this week's episode of the Sports Pro podcast, we evaluate MLS. We look at its sponsorship growth, its increased engagement since Lionel Messi joined the league, and what next for the league and Apple in the third year of its broadcast partnership. We also take a look at the NHL and its successful staging of the Four Nations Face-Off tournament, why Cristiano Ronaldo live streaming Premier Padel on YouTube is a big deal, and what the future of DAZN holds after it received a $1 billion investment from SURJ. Today I'm joined by Mike Long and Sam Karp. Mike, Sam, how are we doing?
Very well, Josh. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Sam, how are you?
Glad to be here. Thanks for steering this one. Excited to see how you do in the hot seat, mate.
Oh, it's taking me back to YouTubing at uni. So hopefully no one listening to the podcast goes to look for that. We obviously recently had Impact Week. Mike, you led on that. Do you want to sort of give a promo for that?
Yeah, no, for sure. A full week of content and takeover of all the Sports Pros channels all around the subject of social and environmental sustainability. We called it Impact Week. And yeah, loads of interesting content. A webinar with the UEFA and our partners at Ottawa Tourism. A piece that I put together around fossil fuel sponsorship, airline sponsorship in football. Sam put together an excellent piece on the impact of what we're seeing in DE&I and the rollback of various programs over in the US by the government and by major corporations and what potential impact that could have on sport generally, but women's sport specifically. The week culminated in the Sports Pro Sustainability Hackathon last weekend with a number of universities from around the world coming up with ideas, solutions, etc. We presented them with a couple of challenges, and it was all around how to make the sports industry more sustainable, socially, environmentally, and crucially, financially as well. So yeah, a lot going on last week. All of the content is housed over on sportspro.com. Do go and check it out.
Definitely something for everyone, be it environmental sustainability, social sustainability, you name it. Go check that out. Speaking of things housed on the Sports Pro website or things to come that are going to be housed on the Sports Pro website, Sam, you have your MLS feature coming out on the website. Do you want to share a little bit about your feature?
Yeah, it's a new regular feature that we're going to be publishing on the Sports Pro site. This first one is in front of the paywall, so I advise people to get it while they can before future editions are exclusive to Sports Pro Plus subscribers. It's called the Health Check. Basically, we're going to be looking at some of the world's leading sports properties, and MLS is the first one to be kind of featured within that. So it's going to be it's an overview of their sponsorship strategy, a breakdown of their current portfolio, also a look at kind of how it's grown in recent years, what's driving that growth, and also, I guess, some of the opportunities for further growth in the future. Obviously, some of the things that we'll come on to during this podcast, I imagine. So that's kind of the focus of the feature, basically just everything about the sponsorship side of the MLS.
Given it's called the Health Check, with where MLS is at the moment, what's your current diagnosis for its sponsorship revenue? Because I noticed that I think it went up 13% in 2024. What is your sort of assessment of where MLS stands in terms of sponsorship revenue at the moment?
Yeah, it's looking good at the moment. In terms of their portfolio itself, they've started this year with a record 36 partners across various different categories. They've got 4 global partners, and then there's some other companies who sponsor them across their domestic markets. So North America, US, Canada. I think some of those deals extended to Mexico as well. And then there's some brands who focus specifically on the US, some specifically on Canada, which I guess aligns with their priorities a little bit more. Maybe also a little bit more affordable to only sponsor the league in one market rather than across multiple. But yeah, generally there's been a lot of growth in MLS's portfolio in recent times. As you said, Josh, 13% increase in revenue year over year. They've added 18 new deals, I think, in the last couple of years at that league level. But it's also trickling down to the clubs as well. So I think the clubs generated $665 million in sponsorship revenue last year. That's according to Sponsor United, which was also 13% year-on-year growth. So yeah, those numbers are positive. It's always good to see kind of things increasing. But I guess it's also worth noting that, MLS is starting from a lower bar than some of the other men's major leagues in the US, which are obviously generating billions in sponsorship revenue every year. So they've still got a bit of catching up to do in that respect. But there are definitely a few things kind of driving that growth.
Yeah, I guess, and we can open up the discussion to both of you here. A lot of those partners have got on board since Messi joined the league 2 years ago now, or at least 2023. I guess, Mike, if you want to take it first, Do you feel MLS has sort of capitalized enough on sort of Messi being around, and how, I guess, has it sort of gone about sort of taking on that approach with Messi in the league?
It's hard to view the commercial health of a league purely through the prism of sponsorship. I think if you extrapolate that out more broadly into a commercial health check, into a business health check, I think MLS is, by most measures, in a really strong, healthy position. And it's coming into its 30th season, expanding to 30 teams, a nice round number finally. The owners of the expansion franchise this year, San Diego, paid $500 million, so $500 million to buy into the league, which is a sure sign of the trajectory that the league has been on pre-Messi, albeit Messi has kind of supercharged so many of those metrics that any owner or commercial executive would be tracking. Certainly for Inter Miami, I mean, you just look at their kind of business transformation that they've gone through since he arrived. Revenue, their operating income, their valuation, I think, has doubled in that time. New sponsors have come on board. They've gone on international tours and just really just built their brand. I mean, interestingly, I was over in a Marks and Spencer's store not so long ago and saw a whole kind of Inter Miami kids range in there, and no other teams in sight. It was just Inter Miami, which I found quite interesting. So clearly growing that brand outside of the confines of Miami and the United States. And then you look at that kind of ripple effect of that when you look at ticket sales, for example, which have been very strong in MLS, over the last year or so. I think the latest figures as well, I think it was 12.1 million fans they got through the gates last season, which is second only to the Premier League globally, which is pretty phenomenal. Over 200 sellouts, I think, and 94% capacity in their stadiums. So clearly fans wanting to attend games, but the ticket sales you see with other teams, when Messi's in town, games are getting moved to larger stadiums, to NFL stadiums, for example, and, selling like hotcakes there. And looking at some of the data that sits within our MLS commercial guide, there's a hell of a lot of data within that. And we produce an annual business report as well, heading into the new season. Some of the data we've seen from our partners at Viagogo, secondary ticketing data, just kind of prove that Messi effect as well. So I think the top 10 most in-demand MLS games on Viagogo's platform all feature Miami. And the most in-demand in terms of ticket sales so far is, I think, coming up in April against Columbus Crew. So that just really speaks to the impact he's had across the board, and everyone is trying to capitalize. I don't know what you guys make of it, but it feels like, there was Beckham, there was Messi, there was other players who arrived in between that have had their own measurable kind of impact on the league, but it has been on this constant kind of upward trajectory for some time. And I know, hearing from MLS execs just this week, we've just run an interview with their senior vice president of brand alliances, who's very, very confident they're on that trajectory. All the signs are there that they're going to sustain this growth beyond Messi. It was happening pre-Messi, and it will continue beyond Messi whenever he no longer competes in the league.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they do. I kind of feel like there's always that carrot dangling of the World Cup on the horizon, and it's been spoken about for as long as I've been at Sports Pro, basically. I think that was when they were awarded it my first year at Sports Pro, so about nearly 8 years now coming up to. But that's always been sort of dangled as the moment that's going to take MLS to the next level, and it feels like this is a real moment right now, sort of entering that 30th year. Messi's still part of the league for at least one more year. His contract runs out at the end of 2025. We'll see if it kind of makes sense, I guess, especially if he wants to play in that 2026 World Cup, to extend for at least one more season. They're making all the right noises about that. I do just wonder, what does that actually look like after 2026? How does MLS capitalize on that? What sort of things are they putting in place right now that we're seeing to ensure that they do see that growth in the back of it? Because I think for everything that you're seeing at the moment and talk of growth and whatnot, and there is all that noise about being able to sustain it beyond Messi, but I still feel like he is the prevailing storyline, at least internationally. I feel like that's maybe different domestically to what we sort of see overseas. As you mentioned about the attendances, Mike, does feel like MLS clubs have done like a really good job of drumming up enthusiasm within like the local communities and making people actually passionate and making people care about those teams and those brands. But I still feel like outside of North America in particular, all we really see is that click of Messi doing something the night before on social media. So I do wonder what kind of things that they are putting in place to actually make sure that beyond 2026 that it is kind of, that they really are sort of having that enduring impact.
I wonder if it's going to be Olivier Giroud's league after Messi leaves, because he's obviously now at one of the LA clubs. But on a more serious note, it'll be interesting to see what MLS does in terms of, you mentioned sort of marketing the league and getting it in front of fans who are overseas. Obviously, the global partnership with Apple, it's entering year 3 now. We don't really hear any numbers or figures regarding subscribers, so we don't actually know how many people are really watching the games behind the Apple TV paywall. But I guess I'm wondering, do you guys feel there's a particular area in which maybe Apple has to do more, or does the league have to work with Apple? Should there be priorities be for their partnership? Because it's a couple years in now. I guess we're still none the wiser whether they've grown the league's audience from a broadcast perspective.
Yeah, you would have thought the numbers would maybe be ahead of initial projections with Messi joining the league for sure. I think steps are being taken to increase kind of distribution of Apple TV and therefore MLS season pass across certain providers as well. So yeah, obviously distribution will continue to be key, but Apple owns a league outright, in terms of its rights, and can kind of market it to the hundreds of millions, billions of people who have its various products and platforms and things. So I think it's still probably early days, it's a 10-year deal. And I think in the context of MLS, the media piece of the overall pie is fairly small comparatively to other leagues. Less than 10% of its total revenue comes from media rights, essentially, in terms of what the league divvies up across its teams. Teams aren't wholly reliant on that, as perhaps teams in other leagues are. As Sam said, they do a good job on the local level to build interest and engagement in the teams. They've got some pretty defined brands there within the league beyond MLS itself. I don't know what the answer is, to be honest, in terms of where Apple goes with MLS next, but I think it's obviously a super important partnership for them. What do you guys think?
It's a tricky one. I feel like I don't watch enough MLS on Apple to know how it's going, which perhaps isn't the best thing to say as a sports business journalist. But I think if you're looking at what you were just saying, Mike, in terms of MLS's share of the pie in comparison to overall leagues, you're talking about in comparison to other leagues. I think even in comparison to other soccer leagues, if you're just talking, say, for example, the Premier League, like the Premier League has a much bigger deal than MLS in the US. So does UEFA, I think, with the Champions League. That's kind of still more appealing to broadcasters at the moment. So there is kind of a bit of a compromise, I suppose, in being on Apple. I don't know if it was the best kind of financial deal that they could get. 2.5 billion is obviously the number floated around, but you say over 10 years, 250 million a year. Once you split that up between all teams, once you factor in maybe their share that Messi gets for playing in the competition. But yeah, so from that media side of things, it is interesting. But as you say, they have taken those steps and increasing the distribution, creating, I think, a dedicated flagship kickoff window for this year, which I suppose we have in the UK with, say, Super Sunday. I guess they're trying to create that kind of appointment to view moment now to ensure that they are driving people to Apple all at once, whether that's a kind of more of a domestic player or a global player as well, to kind of have that flagship game every week that people are tuning into. I'm not sure whether that's kind of the thinking as well. It's a long-term deal. It's kind of a lot of room for evolution within the partnership. I guess it's quite interesting that one story that I saw towards the end of January was that Apple was actually considering selling off some of its international rights to the competition. So obviously, kind of, as we've talked about, a lot of its audience is domestic at the moment. Maybe they haven't quite seen the buy-in that they were expecting overseas as well. I don't know how widely adopted Apple TV is overseas anyway, so maybe that sort of plays into it as well. But I guess we'll kind of see how that plays out also. Yeah,
as you said, they've introduced that Sunday night standout game of the week that they're going to be trying this season. So it'll be interesting to see if that helps to sort of boost subscriber numbers accordingly. Are there any sort of final thoughts on sort of where MLS sort of stands at the moment? Obviously, it's an interesting time because obviously you have the NWSL, which is same sport, that's taking off in popularity, and then as well as sort of you're seeing more and more European clubs sort of come to North America and try and build their fan bases in that market as well. And there have been media reports about UEFA potentially looking at something similar with a relevant deal. So I don't know, what should MLS sort of focus on next, if anything, I guess, other than sort of making sure it's set up for a post-Messi future?
With the Club World Cup coming up, with the World Cup coming up, there's going to be a big focus on US soccer, or soccer in the US. And there's a chance there to capitalize on that and really double down on being the premier year-round soccer platform in that country. That's where they need to place their bets, I think, in terms of just getting people drawn to it. I think it's just a continuation of kind of what they're doing, Messi or no Messi. I think a lot of the teams are profitable or close to. You look at the buy-in from San Diego FC and the rising valuations, revenue growth is happening. So I think it's just continuing to put those kind of bricks in the wall and just building it year by year as much as anything on all fronts, thinking, yes, they do need to think globally and where the opportunities might be there. But actually, I think they need to build domestically first and foremost, because as we always say, the sports media market in the US is of such a size and scale that if you can just carve out a few more percentage points in terms of your market share there, then you're on the right track. I don't know if they'll be looking to expand into new markets necessarily. So on the team front, I think it will be a process of building what they have now and really defining those brands further. I mean, when you think about some of the brands they do have and some of the investors involved, and they have this unique model within world soccer or world football in that it's a closed league and things like that. So there's that financial security, which we know US owners love, and that drives the valuations. So yeah, I think it's kind of got all the ingredients there for continued growth. It just needs a constant flow of star power, I think, whether that's young up-and-coming players or established greats. A mix of all of that, for sure, will sustain the league. But yeah, I think it's definitely kind of auspicious times for football in the US, definitely. And this is a really critical, not only just this season, but the next few years is going to be really critical for where it can go and really pushing the bar higher.
SportsPro is heading to New York this March for two game-changing events, SportsPro New York and SportsPro AI USA, taking place in Manhattan on March 20th to 21st. For a limited time, we're giving our podcast listeners an exclusive $500 discount on our co-located pass. Simply use the code POD500 at checkout. Don't miss this chance to connect with industry leaders, explore the future of sports business and AI, and gain insights from top executives, all under one roof. Spots are filling fast, so grab your pass today and we'll see you in New York.
I guess switching to another North American league, the NHL, they did not do an all-star game this year and instead held the Four Nations face-off tournament involving Canada, US, Sweden, and Finland. And what they've seen has been a massive viewership spike for that tournament. Just over 16 million in North America for the final between Canada and the US, which the Canadians won. I'll come to either of you, but what did you make of the NHL sort of going with this approach as opposed to doing the traditional all-star game that you see with other major US leagues? And what do you take away from the viewership success and the amount of interest that they've picked up because of that tournament?
I think it was the perfect timing, really. It snuck up on me a little bit. It was one of those things that you knew that they were doing, but never quite appreciated how big the demand was for it until you started seeing the viewership numbers around it. The reason I say it was kind of perfect timing, obviously you kind of had the sort of political backdrop feeding into it with Donald Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st US state, and there are quite a few signs in the crowd referencing that, and about the USA becoming Canada's 11th province after Canada won in the final. But there was kind of that element to it. I think the first time Canada and the USA played each other in the tournament actually kind of erupted into a few fights in the first minute of the actual game, which kind of obviously fueled a lot of that narrative also. There are a few other factors at play. Obviously, the NHL players haven't really competed against each other in a national team setting for quite a long time. They haven't been at the Olympics since 2014. The NHL doesn't let them go and play there. So there's a pent-up demand for something like this. So you kind of had that political backdrop. You had the kind of, I suppose, the feeling of FOMO that had been building up over the last 10 years, really. And what you got was this tournament that the NHL created ultimately and became one of the generated some of its most watched games in its history. And you mentioned, Josh, obviously kind of took place instead of the traditional all-star game. It's quite well known in the US that viewership around all-star games have been dwindling in recent years for a number of reasons. The main one being that obviously the players don't take it particularly seriously because there's not really anything riding on it. It's more of kind of a showcase, opportunity for partners to activate, opportunity to capture content with some of the league's best stars as well. And I guess if you're a fan, it's supposed to see all those players in one spot as well. But what the NHL did here was create something that, as I say, there was fan demand for, but also I guess felt like there was something riding on it for the players as well. So yeah, producing really competitive action, and obviously I think that bore out on the viewing figures as well.
Yeah. As Sam said, viewership for All-Star games has sort of gone down recently. I think I read a report saying that the NBA are now considering holding their own sort of international tournament potentially, or rather a tournament utilizing sort of the international stars on their team and such, creating their own sort of tournament. Do you think, first of all, the NHL should make this sort of a regular event for themselves going forward? And what is the takeaway for other leagues? Is there anything that they can learn from what the NHL have done?
Yeah, why not? I mean, just do it every season if it works. If the signals are there for, it's getting the rating and the viewership, do it again and see if you can land it again, I guess, and maybe look for broader distribution and double down on it. All-Star games don't mean a huge amount to most people. It's exhibition stuff and making things matter, whether you've engineered it or not. Or if things matter, then sport, matters to people and people will tune in. So that blend of like having the best talent and that tribalism, that nationalism that comes with national team, international sport and that identity stuff, and then mix that in with a kind of political backdrop, as Sam discussed, all the ingredients that it has all the makings of something that's really going to be quite compelling. So not to say that you can kind of get Trump to say what he says on a whim, but if you can get him to stoke a few of the flames, then it's going to take off. Yeah, I think why not? And we've seen it in other instances in other sports and other leagues of just how you make things matter. I don't know the ins and outs of the NBA in-season tournament, but that seemed to be a success last season, and I'm sure that will continue. So yeah, I guess there is an opportunity just to kind of rethink it. To be honest, to Sam's point, it didn't just creep up on me. I was completely unaware this was happening until I saw people throwing punches on my social feed within a few seconds of the first game kicking off. So it was an interesting one. If you don't follow it that closely, but then it kind of draws someone like me in, then there's something in it. Surely.
Well, apparently they're not doing it again though. So of course, well, they're back at the Winter Olympics next year, I believe, and then the return of the World Cup of Hockey as well in 2028.
Who cares about the World Cup of Hockey? Just get the Four Nations back.
You probably will care when it rolls around, mate. You'll be seeing those fights dropping on the social media feed. But then, yeah, I'm not sure. 2027, 29 maybe, or does that mean like the sort of old All-Star game is back? I don't know. Like what with I suppose maybe it's written in some commercial contracts that they're going to be sponsoring kind of an All-Star thing rather than a national team thing. Perhaps might be some sort of wranglings within that as well. But it'd be interesting to see if other leagues do just copy it, because I feel like hockey lends itself a little bit more to this than some of the others. NBA, we see national teams compete fairly often, albeit not always with NBA players, but I just think that kind of just that needle in ice hockey lends itself to it a little bit more, the physicality of it, competitive element. There's actually two like really, really good teams in Canada and the USA as well, whereas like I guess in basketball, the USA is often shown at the Olympics, so just that much better than everyone else. And then if you throw a few other ice hockey countries into the mix, there's a lot of big European contingent competing in the NHL as well. There is that kind of competitive balance a little bit more maybe than you have in other sports. Obviously the NFL could never do it. I'm not sure that one would go very far, but yeah, I do feel like it's something, there's more in it in hockey than maybe some of the other sort of traditional US sports.
I'll throw out baseball. I feel like baseball, I mean, they have the World Baseball Classic, but if you have Japan and the US, certainly they're up there in terms of the best baseball teams in the world. I think you could make something out of that really and make that into an event that goes on. If Rob Manfred is listening, there you go, for giving that one for free. Globetrotting a little bit, but moving on to another property that has done something innovative and interesting to capture audiences. Premier Padel have streamed their finals on Cristiano Ronaldo's YouTube channel, which should say that Ronaldo is an investor in Premier Padel. It's something that I've not really seen that often in terms of an athlete taking it upon himself to sort of stream games from a tournament, and it's certainly in a developing emerging sport like padel. What did you make of it, first of all? And I guess, do you see other sports or other athletes of taking that experiment? What did you guys think of it?
Yeah, you're right, Josh. I haven't seen this before. Obviously, the direction of travel in sports content, distribution, production, sports media generally has been of this, athletes becoming kind of established media brands in their own right because of the democratization, I guess, of channels. Athletes have a direct route to their audiences. Many of them are streamers and creators in their own right. But this was Ronaldo's YouTube channel, which, launched last year, very quickly amassed 50 million subscribers, which is pretty phenomenal. I think it's, by latest counts, on about 74 million subscribers, which is kind of phenomenal numbers. But it's Ronaldo, isn't it? He's the most followed human on the planet, I think, across all the major social platforms anyway. But so this was through his YouTube channel, and it was a straight up pure distribution play. It was just live streaming. It wasn't him appearing on the feed, introducing it, commentating over it, co-creating it in any way. But, he's got the audience. Premier Padel need and want reach. There was some talk in the press release about, how Ronaldo's, super supportive of paddle and stuff. But I think he's just rocked up at a few events. He's rocked up at lots of events in Saudi Arabia, certainly recently. And I think he invests in like an academy somewhere. He's not like bringing his full weight to bear on paddle by any stretch. But it was an interesting kind of distribution play from Premier Padel, and obviously turned a few heads. If content is king in the digital kind of sports media space, then distribution is queen, and everyone needs it. There was news just this week of ATP signing with Overtime, again, a distribution play to reach Gen Z, younger, audiences, a different type of audience, essentially. And for Premier Padel, they immediately get access to millions and millions of subscribers through Ronaldo's channel. So, yeah, I think, for rights holders, for content owners, certainly upstart properties like that just need distribution and in the right places at the right time and to get to the right audience. Something like this is actually quite a compelling offer. I don't think Ronaldo was paid. And as you say, I wonder if more athletes will be looking at, YouTube first and foremost to build their own brands and to put out content. But seeing this as an opportunity just to say, look, well, I've got this huge audience that you need. Like, I'll just set something up. If Messi did this overnight, he would probably hit similar numbers and could easily become a distribution outlet for these types of properties. So it's kind of the sign of the times and the direction of travel, but I can see it becoming a broader trend.
That's the next battleground then for Messi and Ronaldo, just going head to head for emerging sports rights to broadcast on their YouTube channels.
You're saying Messi should become an investor in pickleball and really just elevate the stakes a bit.
I don't know how many tuned into the streams though. It's important to add that. I don't know how many people actually watch this, so how many Ronaldo followers actually care about Premier Padel's first tournament of the season.
So it's currently on just over 700,000 views. I don't know how many views Premier Padel usually gets for its broadcast, but venture that it's maybe not quite 700,000, or maybe it is globally, but that's just from Ronaldo's YouTube channel alone, so not a bad return. I guess that includes people watching it after the event as well. You mentioned, Mike, that it was sort of a pure distribution player, so quite a bit of criticism for that, knocking around on LinkedIn from kind of media specialists who were expecting more of the Mark Goldbridge style watch-along sort of format where he gets very angry at Manchester United performances. I'm not sure why anyone kind of expected Ronaldo to be doing that, but I don't think he cares that much about paddle. But if it's a pure distribution thing at first, there could be in the future more interesting ways to integrate athletes themselves kind of into the coverage, whether it is by like sort of a bit of commentary, guest appearances at the event and that kind of thing. Yeah, whether we'll see other sports doing it, I don't know. It would definitely lend itself to like those sports who have that kind of celebrity involvement, like the E1 Powerboat series, for example. I've lost track of all of the celebrity owners like Rafael Nadal. I think Tom Brady's involved, maybe even Will Smith. I know he's not an athlete, but maybe the properties like that are looking at this and sort of seeing some opportunities there.
I can't imagine what the pitch was to him personally, if there was a pitch. Yeah, pretty interesting thing. And just one final, I guess, story to wrap up on for this episode, staying in Saudi Arabia. The shock news that DAZN had received investments from Saudi Arabia, from SURJ, reported at $1 billion. I guess I'm not asking for you guys' reaction to this one because this one's been rumored for a little bit, but I guess I'm more asking you guys as how do you feel DAZN will use that capital and what they can do next, I guess, in terms of scale, because as it's been rumored, they've obviously had a lot of dealings in Saudi Arabia, so I guess the tie-up wasn't that much of a surprise.
No surprises, I think. I remember we had DAZN's chief executive, Shai Segev, a couple of years ago on stage at Sports Pro Madrid in conversation, and I specifically asked him about doing business in Saudi Arabia when there was a lot of criticism of it generally within sport, and that was the general narrative. And he said that it's quite comfortable doing business there, and they're building something and it's a big project, and DAZN has been part of that in various ways. So no surprises. I think initial take on it now is confirmed is that it's kind of validation really of what DAZN is building and has built over the past decade or so. It's obviously looking to become this kind of one-stop shop digital sports destination where you've got live streaming and other content, and then betting and e-commerce and other offerings within it. And so I guess it gives them a much needed kind of financial injection to kind of fulfill that objective, I guess, using outside investment to do so. I say much needed because obviously the losses that DAZN makes year after year have been well documented, and it's continuing to lose money. But I think it's interesting from SURJ's perspective because as we've been talking about this, I think distribution is really key. And if you've got skin in the kind of distribution game, which is what DAZN offers you, and you've also got skin in all of these, acquisitions and properties that you sponsor or bankroll outright, or you finance in some way, or you have major investments in, you've got to service all of that, and you need to maximize that return and things. So SURJ has now got this kind of skin in the game with DAZN, a global platform to really take its various sports investments kind of international really, and make sure that they're getting covered in the right way, getting marketed. Let's face it, DAZN's one of the leading sports broadcasters now globally. That's what it's become. It's an interesting move that kind of makes sense, and they're going to be setting up DAZN MENA specifically to kind of service SURJ, I guess, and its various investments. So there's it'll be interesting to see what comes off the back of that. One quick thing to say is we'll have Danny Townsend returning to Sports Pro Live in April. He is the CEO of SURJ. I'm sure he will be fielding a lot of questions around this particular deal and talking about it. So stay tuned for that in a couple of months' time. But what did you guys make of it? Doesn't surprise me. Doesn't surprise anyone. What do you make of it?
I think the DAZN MENA joint venture is the most interesting aspect of it for me, actually. Purely because there's been sort of talk for a long time about kind of Saudi's regional broadcast ambitions. Obviously, Saudi Sports Company was set up a few years ago. I don't know if you remember that name or have seen it knocking about a little bit. And obviously, but their portfolio has been pretty limited, really, and mainly focused on acquiring rights within Saudi Arabia itself rather than across the MENA region, where obviously beIN Sports is kind of the big player, has been around for quite a long time. So I do wonder if kind of this move indicates that Saudi Arabia, which is the owner of Saudi Sports Company, and PIF and SURJ by association sort of see DAZN as the more credible route, I suppose, to challenge beIN in that region. Obviously, beIN holds rights to things like the World Cup, various other premium sports properties. But DAZN, as we say, it's still a relatively new player to the market, but it is sort of more credible, and it does have a lot of pre-existing relationships with some of those big rights holders in other markets around the world. So that's I think that's the interesting thing for me from this deal, is just to see how that plays out and whether DAZN kind of becomes that big competitor now to be in the MENA region for some of those kind of more flagship rights.
I completely agree with Sam, and I'm curious to see, and I know it's obviously very Australia focused, but them acquiring Foxtel pay TV network, I wonder if that suggests they're looking at potentially, I don't know whether they want to put in linear channels at any point, but I wonder if that's a vertical that they explore along with the other many verticals they've done, such as e-commerce and such. So we'll watch that space on. And yes, as Mike says, everyone should come to Sports Pro Live in April, see Danny Townsend speak. But yeah, I think that'll do it. Obviously a lot going on in the industry, and a pleasure to talk about it with Mike and Sam. Gents, thanks so much for your time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, chaps.